who have experience of the US application process. And with today's discussion, you will know how to make your application stand out. We have with us Ms. Sarah Haberson, renowned college counselor, and the team from Ojai AI and Culture Tree to help us understand the process. We also have some Indian students who have been through the process successfully, and they will share their insights and mantras. The road ahead may seem challenging, but with dedication, careful planning, and authenticity, you can create applications that truly stand out. The US application process is your chance to share the story and begin the next chapter of your academic journey. I wish you all the best in your application process and future academic endeavors. Thank you so much.
That's great. So my name is Ragini Pathak, and I'm from Ojai.ai. I'm head of community for them. And, sorry, can you guys hear me? Good. Good. So the first section of this evening today is a panel discussion, and I'll be introducing all the panelists. And, we'll have this discussion around what it means to be organized, what it means to keep yourself kind of somewhat in a Zen state while you navigate this process, because this process is a little tough. But at the same time, with the right guidance and with the right support system, it's totally doable. So the first panelist we have is Sheila Lirio Marcello. She's from Ojai. She has more than 20 years of leadership experience in internet consumer marketplace business, including as the co-founder and chief executive officer of Ojai.ai, a cutting-edge technology startup leveraging generative AI to improve the lives of families and students. She was a former venture partner at NEA and is a founding board member of the Asian American Foundation, TAF. Ms. Marcello previously founded Care.com in 2006 and took it public in 2014. She was the chairwoman and CEO until early 2020 when the company was sold to IAC. Ms. Marcello has been honored with numerous accolades. She was just on Forbes 50 over 50. She was one of Fortune's top 10 women entrepreneurs and appeared at Fortune's Most Powerful Women Summit. She's a Henry Crown Fellow with the Aspen Institute, a young global leader of the World Economic Forum, and a member of the Council of Foreign Relations. Ms. Marcello earned a BA from Mount Holyoke College, which also conferred upon her an honorary doctorate of humane letters in 2015. She has a JD and MBA with honors from Harvard University. In 2014, Marcello became the youngest recipient of the Harvard Business School Alumni Achievement Award. Welcome, Sheila, my boss. I've worked for her at 2 jobs now, so she'll be the one who will be actually moderating the panel. Welcome. Second on the panel is Sarah Haberson, is the founder of Application Nation and the author of Soundbite, the admissions secret that gets you in college and beyond. As the leading authority on college admissions, Sarah has made appearances on NBC Nightly News, CNBC, ABC News, CBS Evening News. She has also published op-eds in the Los Angeles Times and USA Today, and has been quoted as an expert in national publications such as New York Times, The Washington Post, Wall Street Journal, etc. She's the former Associate Dean of Admissions at the University of Pennsylvania and the former Dean of Admissions and Financial Aid at Franklin and Marshall College. As a lifelong student advocate, Sarah's philosophy is that every kid applying to college deserves the best advice. Welcome, Sarah. Third on the panel is Casey Schmalaker, He is the Vice President of New Frontiers Executive Function Coaching, bringing expertise in coaching, marketing, sales, and business development. A graduate of Lafayette College with a dual degree in Government and Law Economics and a minor in Africana Studies, Casey focuses on improving organizational and self-management processes. Since joining in 2013, he's expanded his role from mentoring students to advising professionals and organizations on enhancing executive functions and workplace performance. Welcome, Casey. Next on the panel is Ishan Prasad, is an investment banking analyst at Goldman Sachs with a keen interest in the intersection of climate, tech, and finance. Prior to this role, he gained experience as a consultant at Bain & Company and a product manager at Perch Energy. He is a graduate of Belmont Hill School and holds an AB in computer science and linguistics from Harvard College. In high school, Ishan is a two-time recipient of Apple Developer Conference Scholarship at WWDC, selected as one of the 350 students globally to work directly with Apple engineers. He was also, as a high schooler, a Coca-Cola scholarship chosen from over 90,000 applicants for the prestigious $20,000 scholarship. Welcome, Ishan. Last but not the least, Kavish Pathak is a student of Northeastern University, a product management intern at Ojai, and an elected member of the 2024 Electoral College, being one of the youngest members of the Electoral College. Prior to his current roles, he has worked as a Moakley Fellow for the chair of the Massachusetts Democratic Party and for the Representative Tammy Govea and Senator Edward Markey. He has been covered by the Boston Globe and recognized at other leading figures across Massachusetts. Welcome, Kavish. So that's our esteemed panel, and Sheila will be moderating. I'll
Thank you. Thank you, Ragini. Thank you, Ms. Pandey. Thank you, Anu. I'm excited to be here. We're going to do a few segments because obviously a lot of parents and students in the audience are really interested around managing organization for applying for college as well as stress. I have two boys. I have a 32-year-old. I'm going to be a grandmother next month, and 24, and I have absolutely been through the college process, so I can empathize. And my youngest just graduated from Yale, so he did well there. So let's start with Casey around executive function. Do you want to kind of describe what it is? I know I'm a planner. If I took the Myers-Briggs, I'm an ENFJ, right, which I'm a planner, which is super critical for a college application. So turn it over to you first.
Beautiful, thank you. Very happy to be here. So executive functions, I always like to start off, they're goal-directed behaviors. So they are the cognitive strategies that help you achieve goals. And so I sometimes use the analogy of like GPS. And so when you set a plan, I don't know if you remember, you used to print out MapQuest, right? And you'd print out your route of how to get somewhere. And then you're on the way and you'd hit a car accident. And your route doesn't adapt, right? And that is like lacking some executive function strategies. Current GPS, it's constantly getting feedback and helping you adjust your route to get to your goal as effectively as possible. So organization is one of the key things. I'll tell you what a scholar has said. It's actually not an executive function. Organization is a time management strategy. And I always share this over just with parents because sometimes we can impose like you should be organized, but is the lack of organization getting in the way of achieving goals, right? If you're running out of the house and you can find everything, then you're not going to be late. But if you're running out of the house, you lose things, you can't get there, then it impacts arriving on time. And so I always like to start off that you can go through all these different academic terms of what these executive functions are, but it's best to zoom out and see what's getting in the way of achieving your goals, because you don't work on these things for no reason. I always share over, if I asked you guys all, I want you every morning to hop on one foot for 5 minutes. The first thing you're going to say is, why? How would that help me? And sometimes when we approach working on executive functions, time management, prioritization, planning, working memory, which many people don't know of unless you study it, but all of these things, you don't learn them just to learn them. You learn them in relation to something you're trying to accomplish. And I'm so happy to be a part of this panel right now because college applications are the first real time of something outside of school, something outside of being graded, that is an opportunity to work on those executive functions. The one last thing I'll just say as kind of a broad overview before we go into more. The common phrase is executive functions is the CEO of your brain. And so what CEOs do is they hold everything together. They don't do a lot themselves of like in the weeds. They push things forward. They help adapt. And so that CEO of your brain is helping reflect on what is the goal. Goal setting is actually a pre-executive skill. And so when you set that goal, it's how am I adapting and strategizing to get there most effectively?
It's the chunking of things, right? You've set up a goal, like I'm a CEO, so I actually understand that, right? You want to take it aside and understand the goal and then create milestones in an organized way and find techniques for yourself on how to organize certain things, right? Now let me turn it over to Ishan because it's very specific, your experience in high school. What were the challenges that you faced, executive function, and what did you do a lot of 9th and 10th graders? So to start early is super important.
Well, first of all, it's great to hear, and for those who are here and are thinking about these questions and maybe feeling a bit of anxiety, I think the first step is showing up. And so the fact that you're here thinking about it and that there's so many freshmen and fresh faces here, like that is very much showing that and so I think that is the right first step. I think when I think back to my time in high school, what's tough is you have so many different activities that you're juggling. And I think in high school, you're being told that, oh, these are things that you want to keep up for 4 years and you don't even know what you like. And so I think that aspect of goal setting for me and visualizing, or at the very least talking to my peers and my friends who are just a couple grades above, like early when the school year starts, to say what's out there, what I try, like get your hands dirty. I definitely remember freshman year for me was a chance to try a bunch of different sports and clubs. And then to be honest with yourself, maybe a couple months in, like how am I feeling? Check in with what you and your parents, how you guys are thinking about the activities that you're doing, and then be proactive about deciding which activities you want to keep pursuing. And I think that proactive sort of checking and rechecking with yourself and with your family is a huge strategy that I used during my high school time.
So a lot of it is communication. Communication with students ahead of you, getting tips from them, being proactive, communicating with your parents. So Casey, back to you. When do you know that there are executive function challenges that a student is facing, and how should a parent identify that, oh, we may need some help here?
So there's a couple of ways, but a key way is if you are seeing a lack of problem solving and adapting. And so there's that old line, misattributed to Albert Einstein, but that line of doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different outcome, that's the definition of insanity. Really, it might be the definition of a lack of executive functions, because it's not that people don't want to succeed. And I think this is just such an important thing. Everyone wants to succeed. What that success looks like may be different for people, but everyone wants to succeed. Start hearing things like, I hate this class. It's often a defense mechanism of, I don't know how to handle this class, and so it's easier to say I hate it or I don't like it. And so that's one warning sign of just, I don't know what to do. I don't know how to do this differently. Another warning, and this is actually more from the parents, if you feel like you constantly have to be almost like the secretary to your kids, be here, do this, do this, do this. You are their executive functions. Like you are what they need to accomplish their goals. And so if you go to pull back and you don't see them taking over some of that void, then they are not developing those executive functions and they may need some help. I just want to share one other thing. Executive functions they develop in your prefrontal cortex, which does not fully develop until your mid-20s. And so when we talk about executive functions, there's two aspects. It's the actual neurological, like, is the infrastructure there for these executive functions to develop? But then it's the strategies to develop around it. And so some people may struggle with certain executive functions just neurologically, but can they develop strategies to compensate? And so a great warning sign is talk to your kids, and for yourself as high schoolers that are here, if you don't know what to do, ask for help. Start getting some input of, I'm facing this problem, and I don't know what to do to address it. And I'll talk a bit solving and how this can be a great tool for lifelong success in developing those skills, but really just seeing almost like a deer in headlights of, I'm stuck and I don't know what to do differently, and I don't know how to adapt. And really think about it. You're not taught these skills in school. And so what often happens is you learn by observing from others, and some people don't learn that way effectively. And so filling in that gap of starting to develop these strategies and skills. So as a parent, if you feel like you're compensating for these executive functions, try and pull back and see if they can begin to fill that. If you're a student and you just feel like you don't know what to do differently and you're struggling with how do I manage myself, then that's a sign that you might just want to reach out for some help. I want to be clear, it's not a sign that you can't develop these. It just may be a sign that you may need to put in a little more work in certain areas. And that's universal for everyone. So it's not that something's wrong with you. I'm a very disorganized person, but I saw that as a problem and developed strategies to make it not a problem for me.
Yeah, let me emphasize that again. There is nothing wrong with you. I always say to people, you're perfectly imperfect. That's a great thing. It's a skill that you just have to learn, right? And I say this because my son, who's now 32, graduated. He's in private equity. He's got a great career. He had executive function challenges when he was in high school, and he had to learn those skills, and they are learnable. Now let's actually move to that conversation. What are the kinds of strategies, I'm moving to Ishan again, that especially now, you're seeing like AI tools, like what do you wish you had when you were in school?
No, definitely. And I think I use AI tools these days to plan my schedule, especially my life outside of work, and to keep track of what's going on. I think that's very important. When I was in high school, I think I was a very simple person when it came to the tools I used to organize. It was my Notes app on my iPhone, and it was Google Calendar. And for me, I felt like I just needed something to keep track of what I was doing. And I think to your point earlier, my parents gave me the freedom to let me pick the activities that I wanted to do and to let me make decisions for myself and to deal with the consequences. And so part of that meant planning for yourself, especially in high school. If you're playing tennis or on a sports team, like you have to make sure you make it to all the practices and make sure your parents or whoever's driving you will take you to the games. And so it was very simple, and it wasn't very tech heavy, but it was just making sure that I wrote down everything I wanted. And these days with these LLMs, like you can set that into your chat feature and they can give you tips and ways to strategize around your timing as well.
So what tools do you recommend in terms of time management and improving executive function skills?
So one thing that Ishan said I think is really important, simple tends to be better. Simple yet accessible. And that's really important because the more complicated a tool is, the more effort you have to put in to use that tool. And that can actually be a time waster, and it can be a lot more to navigate. But I can give some specific tools, but what I think is really most important here is this concept that when you're a part of developing a strategy or investigating and researching a tool and you find, go with that one, even if you know a better tool. As a parent, maybe you're like, but I know this is a better one. Let them go with it. And so as a student, do a little bit of your own research. Don't let it become like a YouTube black hole that you just keep researching and you never select one, but have some skin in the game. And so for parents, bite your tongue sometimes, not to just say, why don't you do this? Why don't you do this? Because what I always say to parents for these tools, now if it doesn't work, guess whose fault it is? It's your fault. It was your idea. You had a bad idea. But if you involve your kids, and as a student, if you're involved, you can actually give your feedback from the get-go. I like this tool. I don't. When it comes to time management and scheduling, my big recommendation is have something that can be on the go. I tend to guide students to using digital calendars, but if a student really wants to use a planner that they can, like my only requirement is, can it fit in your pocket? Can it go with you somewhere? Or do we have some system that if you hear something out in the world, that it can get back to your planner? And so sometimes we see that with whiteboards. I find when it comes to like checklists and planning and tracking things out, having that visual component is very helpful. So using whiteboard calendars, whiteboard lists, this is taking it from our working memory, which is just relying on, is this accurate? And we always think our memory is accurate, but it's often not. But when it comes to time and planning things out, whether it be in a day or a longer schedule, you want to make it visual. Time is very abstract. And so by putting it into visual, you're making it more concrete. And we can go through a whole list of other apps for different executive functions to help out. But again, it goes back to the original point. Find something that resonates with the person using it. And that journey of finding what resonates with you is going to lead to you much more likely to follow through with using it. And the last point I'll say there is a tool is only as useful as you use it. So remove this aspect that it's a magic wand. I love the AI example. AI doesn't just give you right answers. You have to know how to engage with it to get the most out of it. So don't go in thinking these tools are going to solve the problem. What these tools are going to do is help you solve the problem, and that's for any resource. It's only as good as you know how to use it, and it's only as good as following through with using it.
Great segue, actually. So very quickly, you're probably wondering, Sheila, you're the founder of Care.com. What are you doing on this stage, and why are we at Ojai.ai sponsoring? We kind of fell into this, to be honest. Ojai.ai is actually helping families, the chief household officer, generally the mom, organize her life and time management. But actually, let me turn it to Kavish, because the segue is that you said, as kids, you encourage them to find stuff on their own. He found us on his own and started to use it, not by design, actually, for college students. So you were applying to college, so describe how we kind of fell into this.
Yeah, so like a lot of people, when generative AI sort of blew up, I got super excited. It was senioritis, so for the wrong reasons. But as I started using it, I also saw a lot of benefits for it. First of all, to zoom out, there's some really great tools for students. If you think about Grammarly can make sure that you can cite your sources really well. Grammar, really important. Keeping you organized, that's where Ojai comes in. There's a lot of tools out there and a lot of people that have personal assistant tools. I've seen, Jamboards, Mindy. What's special about Ojai is that it has the best of both worlds, where you can sort of give O so much different things. And what I would
O is the assistant.
O is the assistant at Ojai. And I would just throw a billion things at O. I would throw assignments, my syllabi, everything. And it would just go on my calendar. I would get reminders. It would be put on my lists, and I would just have everything there. And how that helped me as a student is I would just go on my calendar, I would see my list, and I would see, okay, what's upcoming this week? And I'd see, okay, I have a quiz at the end of the week, homework is due this day, and it just kept me together and organized. And I think that's a really strong thing about AI and LLMs is that it can take a ton of data, and then it can just keep it.
You're going to show your actual account? Is that okay?
I will show my
It's
actual
not that
account.
private? Okay. Okay. Are we? Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so this is my actual account. I've put in a request to put in 3 times to study for an AP Bio test. This is something I would actually do in high school. And O has found 3 times on my calendar just by scanning it for me. I didn't have to open the app. And I asked it to put it in. O has found those times. O has now blocked out those times on my calendar. I'm time boxed. I can lock in for that class. I can study, and I'll be all set, and I'll be ready to go and be able to prep for this exam and make sure that I'll be able to stay on track. O is that person that can keep students organized. Another example is I had, tryouts, texted O those dates, O added it to my calendar. That is super helpful. You don't have to add it to your calendar anymore. Another thing when it comes to setting up your routine, just text O when you have practices, and then after that, tell them what day. O will add it to your calendar, and then if you want to add things to your routine, going to the gym, walking your dog, tell it to O. O will find it on your calendar, and you can even ask O to send you a reminder to make sure you can actually do that thing and you remember to do it, which is super important to setting a routine. You need to do something, I think, 28 days in a row before you set a new routine. So super helpful in setting a new routine. O has your back on that too. This is O actually reminding me to leave home in the morning at 7:45 a.m. Senioritis will get you. O has your back. I texted O the list I was applying for college, and O automatically put it there with the deadlines. And then, yeah, I have all my deadlines together. I can visualize it. I have it together again. And then I can also ask O things like, hey, I have this NYU supplement that I need to work on. And NYU is one of my favorite choices. O boxed out time for me to work on NYU. If you've seen the NYU application, at least my year, I had to send in 2 essays. So O found that time, blocked it off my calendar, and even told me what I had to do that week. So I was aware of my other commitments. Told O that I'd been procrastinating, so O was like, hey, you have to lock in, do it on the weekend. Told O I wanted some study snacks, so O said, give me your snacks, gave O my snacks. O put it out on a list for me, and get ready for it. It's over here. I could add or delete stuff onto that list. I like mint chocolate chip ice cream from Ben & Jerry's. Who doesn't? And this is going to be really cool, but I can either share it with a family member so my mom or dad could actually pick it up for me, or I could shop on Instacart and just have it delivered straight to my door. And I don't even have to worry about going to the store and being distracted for the day. This last one's a really cool feature. I use it in college still. Take a photo of that invite, prom invite, send it to O. Human agents will actually just add it to your calendar, and it will be all set and ready to go. If it had more important dates like other deadlines, those deadlines would be added too with reminders. I've done this in college for things like thrift stores and other stuff. Perfect. So yeah.
I thought, and that was his private account, so thank you for that. Pretty active. But part of the reason we wanted him to share was because this was not how we actually designed the product. It was actually for moms. And the kids started to find it on their own and started to use it because of this need to be organized, especially the high stress and pressure. Let me move to that topic now. Ish.
I just want to say one thing there that I loved about really seeing that. You could use it how you want to. And there's a lot of other tools that are very specific that it feels like it doesn't meet your needs. So you move on to the next tool, you move on to the next tool. With something that casts a wide net, you don't have to use everything. You use what's benefiting you. And I think that's just a really nice aspect, that there's multiple ways that it can complement, where you may be struggling because other aspects you may want to keep doing yourself. And that's okay. But that flexibility allows for you to determine, and you have agency in using it.
That's great. So, Ishan, you want to just talk about managing stress and how important that is? This is a really, not only being organized, what modern tools are out there so that everyone knows. Now there's the real part of applying to college is stress and how to manage that.
Certainly. I think for me, a really key insight that I feel like I gained in the middle of high school was recognizing what were my internal stressors and then what were my external stressors. And so sometimes you might have a stress that you realize is actually maybe more being forced on you than you yourself are having. And so taking the time to realize, oh, like I'm stressed about this test, I might not be as stressed about what I'm going to do for a job or my career at this point in my life, and recognizing that, okay, if it's an external stress or even if it's internal, you can take moments to work on what you're doing right now and put the rest of it in a box. And I had a guidance counselor in school who would talk about this concept of this box in your head where the things that are stressing you or the things that aren't but are stressing others around you, you can put that away and think more purposefully about the things that you have to get done now and use that to be more proactive, and then ultimately come back to that box. If you use a tool like an Ojai or any notes app, you can use that as a way to keep that off your working memory and then come back to it at another point. But I think for me, taking those times to divide and conquer as opposed to feeling like I have the weight of the world and all those stresses at once was a huge weight off the shoulders.
How many of you, we call it the lizard brain, where you kind of freeze at times and you can't act on something because there's so much stress and you have anxiety? How many of you have felt that? I think everybody, students get to raise their hands too, right? This sense of like so much going on that you can't actually think. That's part of the reason of learning the tools and strategies to not only breathe, but then think about, how do I write it down? How do I get organized? And if I have milestones and I'm achieving them, then the stress starts to go away. But Sarah, do you want to just touch on everything that we've been talking about? Executive functions, school, tools, and then also just managing stress and advice you've given, because she's the expert.
Thank you, Sheila. I think one of the biggest mistakes that families make when they think about the college process is they think that more is better. And it's not. And we'll be talking about that in my speech later on this evening. But it's not about taking as many classes as you can possibly fit into your schedule. It's not about taking standardized tests as many times as you can squeeze in. It's not about sending as many letters of recommendation to a college. And it's not about doing a million activities. It's about doing a handful of things really, really well. One thing that I always try to encourage students to do is, when you're thinking about your college list, often when they come to me, the list is, 25, 30 colleges long. And I start to count up what that means in terms of timing. It's not just, it's going to take so much time to fill out those applications, but also all of those essays. That could end up being 50 to 60 extra essays. So my approach always, and I'm a mom of 3 kids, so I have the same approach with my own kids, do what is reasonable, because you'd be surprised. Even the most selective colleges in this country and abroad, they aren't expecting students to do as much as students are doing. So less can be more. Less classes, less standardized tests, less activities, less applications. It makes your life so much easier. And frankly, when you look at the product, you look at the applications you put together, you look at your grades and what you've been able to achieve with activities, if you're not doing too many, you're going to be so incredibly proud with what you have and what you've done. So more is not better in the college admissions process. More might be better in other industries, but in applying to college, it can actually be a lot more reasonable. And timing is everything. I was talking to Neil before the program began, and it was all about making sure he got as much done as he could when he had more time. And often that is going to be in the summer, at least for the college process. So that's what I would say. Keep it manageable. The list of colleges, who writes your letters of recommendation, how many activities you do. You don't have to be a superhero. You just have to be a regular kid. And when you are, you can recognize the extraordinary things that you do.
Ishan, you want to add?
Yeah, if I can add, I think that's so true. And for me, one of the greatest lessons that I think we as a family had I'm a twin, and so my brother and I applied together to colleges, was recognizing what is in the control of the college, or just how the process works. And I think it's often easy to feel like, okay, these are test scores and I can always improve, and so let me focus my time on test scores. When in reality, past a certain point, the returns on getting a slightly marginally better test score won't really be what's most important. And so thinking about what drives your interest, what drives your passion, and once you've sort of hit the mark on what's important for the application, really focusing on your story and who you are, that was, I think, a really important lesson. It's easy to feel like the things you can control are the most important items of an application, when in reality, it's the story you're telling about yourself that is ultimately most important.
It's a transition as a good conversation on parenting. And the reason is we've talked about empowering the students to understand the skills of the learning executive function, learning the tools and seeking it yourself, managing your mental stress. Now, parents play a role in this mental health, right? And as Sarah pointed out, if there's pressure on the kids to apply to 30 colleges, it's a lot on the kids. And so, Casey, let's talk about the role parents play on mental health. And you guys, I am going to put you on the spot. Just talk about how your parents were and the expectations there.
So I want to first just really connect this over with stress. When someone is stressed, and it's meant to be a short-term response. When we talk about stress, it's the fight or flight response, and it was meant to keep us safe. And so when we have a stress reaction, it's run and avoid, or it's fight. And when you have chronic stress, so stress is not an S word. Stress is a good thing. You have a paper due the next day, you're going to cram all night and get it done. That's when you want stress. And so we can't think of stress as black or white, first of all. What is bad is chronic stress. And not a lot of people understand what chronic stress does to the brain. So when you're stressed, it releases cortisol. And when cortisol is in your brain for sustained periods of time, it prevents learning. And when you have a student that is chronically stressed, they're going to feel that lizard brain. They're not going to know what to do, and they're going to, maybe it has nothing to do with executive functions, but because they're so stressed, they just need to be told what to do because they can't do the thinking and learning on their own. And this becomes a terrible, terrible cycle.
And their performance in class also gets impacted, starts to go down because of the stress of even the concept of applying to college stresses them out.
So, especially with parents starting younger, but this is something to do throughout, is to find when there is good stress and bad stress. And so one thing definitely as a parent to support this, poor outcomes aren't failures and they're not bad things. One of the biggest, most supportive things you can do as parents is to help instill a growth mindset in your kids. And for those that haven't heard of the term, a growth mindset is every obstacle you face is a learning opportunity. It's not a bad thing. I can't tell you, half of my job as a coach is getting students to feel comfortable to tell me, I got a 70 on it. This happened today. Student said I got a 70 on the exam, and he went off on all the litany of excuses as to why. It was the teacher's fault. It was everything else. The defense mechanism came in because he's like, did my mom ask you to check my grades? And I know that's no one's intention, but there was a stress response, an immediate, I need to run away. And if you want any growth, you want to encourage, no, this is something we should talk about. This is something we should learn from. And so immediately when things don't get done, you don't approach it as shame on you. And I know no one uses that language, or hopefully you don't use it too often if you do, but what's important is, well, what got in the way? Because first of all, as a parent, if these are goals for the students, they want to. So rather than approaching as, and sometimes our language can communicate things we don't mean. But when we say, why didn't you get it done? Versus, hey, what got in the way of getting it done? Is there anything I could help out with? We've taken a negative experience that leads to avoidance and shutting down and internalizing this stress and trying to hide it. And we've turned it into something of, let's learn from this and let's do better moving forward. And that cannot start early enough. It is problems are fun things to talk through. Is the work in solving them easy? No. But we can talk about them in a positive, supportive way. And that is one of the biggest areas to support your kids through this college application journey, is we want this to be a positive experience. And we want to learn from this, because the other real point here is the goal just to get in college? Or is the goal to be successful in college and to be happy in college and to be set up for a successful career? That stuff doesn't just happen. And so understanding that it's not just the destination, it's the journey and everything you learn along the way.
It's the life skills. So Kavish, please describe sort of, what were the stressors for you as you think about, especially with the family, as you applied? And what were the techniques that you used, or how were you communicating to handle the stress?
So I think my parents have always been very supportive of me. They know that I am very motivated myself, and that with me, I'm very much, I sort of make my own rules and then run with them in the house, and then everyone else sort of tries to keep up at times, is sort of how we do things sometimes. And it's not always loved, but it's tolerated. But when it came to it, at times there was conversations around deadlines, right? Of course, my parents want to know these deadlines, and they want to be involved in that. And so at times I have my own deadlines in my head. So there was disagreements there. That was a stressor during that. So I think that's definitely a conversation that needs to happen. Early on in the process, we had those conversations, I think a little too late, because I started working on college apps towards the end of the summer, and I probably should have started earlier in the summer. And then other thing was, I think that it wasn't my direct family, but the rest of my family had sort of this big rate. My brother and my cousin applied in the same college cycle, and so they had the same college race of Kabir got in this college, Devish got in this college, and it was all that. And so even though I wasn't racing anyone in that cycle, I sort of thought I was racing with my cousin in the past cycle. So I felt like I was in that race again. And so it took a lot for me to remove myself out of that race, and realize I was sort of running my own thing. I wasn't really in that competition of any sorts.
Ishan?
Casey, I think what you said really resonated about making it a conversation. I feel like, especially towards by the time I was applying for high school, I felt like my parents and I had an understanding that they were here to provide advice, but ultimately their answers aren't the gospel, and you have to figure out for yourself what's right. And I think that is so important for the rest of your life going forward, being able to find mentors, your parents, and those outside as well, who will give you their take on the situation. And my dad would always say to me that he's trying to give his best advice, and we get that, but sometimes he doesn't have all the information. And so a huge part of our conversations at the dinner table or after dinner when we were just catching up was me and my brother giving our sort of take on where we're thinking, or what deadlines we have upcoming, or what goals we have for ourselves, and then hearing his take, and luckily getting a caveat from him that he doesn't have the full picture, and so we have to offer him some of that insight for him to provide the right guidance. And so I think for parents, that means being okay with your kids making a decision that differs from your own. And for kids, it means providing your parents the clarity and the opportunity for them to hear what's going on in your life, so that they can try to give you an informed answer as well.
I just wanted one quick thing there, just a great tool I give to parents: use more questions instead of statements. And this applies also for anyone in professional fields working. Unsolicited advice, you have a 50-50 shot on if that's going to land. So often it's, do you want to hear what I think? Ask for permission. Sometimes they'll say no. Don't waste your breath. You're going to be stressed out. If they say, no, I don't want your advice, they weren't going to listen anyway. And then you're just upset they didn't listen. They're upset of, why do they not trust me to make my own choices? But when you have that dialogue, it's important to be humble through this. As parents, You want to have all the right answers, but you don't. And you don't know. And sometimes you can stick your own foot in your mouth, where they go out and they make their own choice and maybe a little rebellious, and I'm not going to listen to my parents. And if they prove you wrong, that waters down what you may share in the future. And so by using questions, there's this other term called cognitive modeling. The questions you ask them are questions that we want them to maybe ask themselves and prompt themselves through. So you're teaching them the internal monologue that they haven't practiced yet. Whereas if you just give statements, their confidence may go down that they can't come up with the answers on their own without you. And you can guide with questions to guide to answers, but let them come to them on their own.
You know, so much of it is the communication skills, but it's also the research. What's so interesting is I was born and raised in the Philippines, and so I applied from college from the Philippines to the U.S. And so then my 32-year-old, when he went through college, applying for college, it was a different process from when I went to school as an immigrant. And even my younger son, who then applied to Yale, was also a different process. And then the research, let me just emphasize this, the research, whether on executive function, managing stress, and the other one I'm going to emphasize is sleep. Especially at this age, 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th graders applying to manage stress. When I raised my kids, I used to say, well, you know what? We got up super early. What are you guys doing, being lazy, sleeping in on a weekend, and you should go do this, and da-da-da-da-da, and I would like nudge them and everything. And then later I read about the research that having the kids sleep 12, 14 hours is actually really good for them to perform in school, good for them to manage stress. But I had to go learn this while I was raising my children because I had my own perception being raised in the Philippines of my expectation from how my parents raised me, but medical research had advanced. And as a parent, I was catching up to all of that. So I just say this to say, listen to the experts. And I know we're going to wrap up soon, but before I do, Sarah, did you want to just add another piece of advice? I know you're going to share most of your thoughts, but especially to parents.
Sheila mentioned something, this college process for our kids. I have a 18-year-old, 14-year-old, and 11-year-old. It's so incredibly different than when we were applying as parents, whether it was to American colleges or abroad. Interestingly, so much has changed in the college admissions process, even in the last 5 years. So I have a lot of families that come back for a younger child to work with me, and they will say, oh my, it's so different than even 5 or 6 years ago. What we are seeing, and you see it in the news every day, there is a college admissions story in the news every single day for the past 5 years. Before that, and I've been in this field for 25 years, nothing changed. So first thing is sometimes the kids are closer to the process and have some really good instincts about applying to college. And the parents, if they're invested, they want to learn and be a part of it. I think the best piece of advice to parents right now is don't talk about college 24/7. We will say in our Application Nation group a lot, pick one day out of the week, especially as your child reaches the end of junior year, going into senior year. Pick one day of the week, a specific time, where that's where you talk as a family about the college application process. Because if we as parents keep bringing this up constantly every single day, it causes so much stress, and it gets the student to a point where they start to rebel and go in a different direction. So if you do have a junior, or if there are juniors in the room tonight, I would just say once a week, same time, same place with your family is going to be plenty to go over deadlines and figure out what you need to do in the coming week.
Well, first, before thanking our panelists, what you're hearing tonight, if you're 9th or 10th grade, know what executive function is, Know that those are important skills in the college application process, but also for just life, right? To learn how to plan, to be organized. It actually is a huge part of succeeding in the college application process, but it is so necessary in life. Parents, encourage your kids to find tools that work for them. There's so many tools now. It's not just OHI. AI can really help get kids organized, and they can find the different tools on their own. Encourage that proactiveness and ownership and eagerness to use those things to help themselves. And it is a very different day and age now. The third is managing stress. You could do all and just keep on them and micromanaging them, as Casey's trying to advise, to say, learn to communicate, ask questions. Communication is so key. And then last part is really part of our role as parents, even though I've got 2 kids, I've got to have a grandkid soon, right, is that it has changed. And so what used to work and the techniques that worked for us in the college application process is not the same as much anymore. Certainly organization, certainly communication, there are some baseline things. But there are new tools out there, and there are, based on the research, on how to help children succeed in managing stress and overall mental health. So with that, I thought I just would summarize it. Thank you, Kavish, Ishan, Sarah, and Casey, and I'm sure they're going to stay for more Q&A. Thank you so much. Thank you.
So with this, actually, we are going to transition. Sarah, you can stay here. We are going to transition to the next part of the evening where Sarah Harbison is going to talk about the entire college application process. I do encourage everyone, if you are on Insta, follow her page. It's her first name and last name. Her videos are awesome. I'm learning so much about the entire process through that. So Sarah, if you can come over and also keep your questions. We will have, after half an hour, we will have time to ask all the panelists the questions that you guys might have.
Good evening, everyone. I want to thank the Consulate General of India for inviting me to speak tonight. It is such an honor to be here. I'm a Jewish girl from New Jersey, and I'm just coming off the high of the Jewish New Year, Rosh Hashanah. This is a full circle moment for me, and I'll tell you why. I grew up in an underserved community in southern New Jersey, which feels like a world away from here. I attended a huge public high school. We had a 25% high school dropout rate, yet less than 20% college attendance rate. That meant that there were more students in my high school dropping out of high school than actually going to college. I was one of 5 Jewish kids in my class, and there were 2 South Asian students in the class with me, and we were all friends. Renu and Raj had a lot in common with me. My mom is an immigrant, and just like their parents were immigrants too. We grew up in households where education was just as important as family and our heritage. We were also all nerds, and we all played on the tennis team together. We also shared confusion about the college admissions process. We didn't have college counselors where I was from. We had guidance counselors, and they were dealing with some serious stuff, teen pregnancy, those high school dropouts, serious gang-related incidents. They didn't have time, nor did they have experience with students who applied to college, especially the more selective colleges. Renu, Raj, and I were on our own. As I started thinking about tonight's remarks a couple of weeks ago, I remembered that Renu went to Cornell. That was a very big deal in my community, because it wasn't just that she was going to college, she was going to an Ivy League university, and that did not happen often from where I'm from. I went to a tiny college called Hamilton College. No one in my community had ever heard of Hamilton College. Raj, though, I couldn't remember for the life of me where he went to college. But if you ever wonder why I work 7 days a week, day and night, for 25 years in college admissions and college counseling, it is because of students like myself, like Renu, like Raj, like all the students and parents that feel so lost about the college admissions process. Jews and South Asians have a lot more in common than what bonded me, Renu, and Raj together in high school. Even back in the 1990s, when I was in high school, we made up a very small portion of the population. Yet there was a high concentration of us applying to college. Now it's even higher, especially for South Asians. Yet South Asians are often associated or categorized under the larger umbrella of Asians applying to college. In fact, in the book The Chosen, which is the seminal book on racial discrimination in college admissions, which inspired me to start writing about the Asian bias in the admissions process, in the book The Chosen, South Asians were never mentioned once. The Chosen was written by Jerome Karabel. He is a renowned researcher in higher education and a famous sociology professor at the University of California, Berkeley. Karabel wrote on how Harvard, Yale, and Princeton limited the number of Asian students, Black students, Hispanic students, and Jewish students for decades. How could he not specifically mention South Asians? It is not only a missing chapter in Karabel's book, it is a missing chapter in the greater conversation on race in college admissions. When the US Supreme Court ended affirmative action in 2023, Asian bias was supposed to end in college admissions. However, Harvard, Yale, and Duke all reported declines this year in the percentage of Asian students in their incoming freshman class. Granted, we are only 1 year in to this post-affirmative action era. But the decline in Asian students is relevant to point out just as much as it is to distinguish South Asians from all other Asian students applying to college. So how should South Asians approach the college admissions process? I have 7 things, and they're specifically geared towards South Asian students. Number 1, don't overdo the academic piece of the process. Yes, that's right. Taking classes in the summer, skipping lunch during the school year to squeeze in 1 more AP class, self-studying for AP exams when you haven't even taken the AP class, does not equal success in the admissions process. We talked about this on the panel. Students who take on too many academic courses, spend their summer taking more academic courses, self-studying for those AP exams, even though they haven't taken the AP class. It leads to an enormous amount of stress for the student. It limits the student's ability to be regular teenagers, to have a social life, to do extracurricular activities, which tends to bring so much joy to high school students. It also can lead admissions officers to think that the student only cares about academics. This is a stigma that has been placed on Jewish students and South Asian students. So what do you need to take in high school? You only need to take 5 core academic subjects a year. Doesn't mean doubling up. It means taking 1 English class, 1 math class, 1 history class, 1 science class, 1 language class for all 4 years of high school. That's all colleges expect from high school students. If a student wants to take elective classes, they can if it fits in their schedule. But after those 5 core classes, they should be taking a lunch. They should not be taking another class. And you know what? If they're able to, they should also take a study hall. Admissions officers at colleges have no idea if a student takes lunch or a study hall. You don't get a grade, you don't get credit for lunch and a study hall. It doesn't ever appear on your transcript, and even if it did, those admissions officers would be thrilled to see that the student is truly giving their brain a break during the school day to eat lunch. That is something important. And if they have study hall, it's so smart to be able to get some of that homework done so that students are not staying up until 1 or 2 in the morning, because as we just talked about, sleep is so important. Number 2, if you're going to spend money with your child applying to college, I want you to invest in one thing: test prep. Test prep so that your kids can be well prepared to take the SAT or ACT, not both. Expectations for South Asian students and all Asians in general when it comes to standardized tests like the SAT and ACT are. Now you might say, well, there are over 1,000 colleges just in the US that are still test optional, meaning you don't have to report a test score. However, it is clear from the thousands of students that I work with a year that those who report high test scores have a higher chance of getting into college and a higher chance of getting a merit scholarship. And those colleges that are now going back to requiring the SAT or ACT, yeah, those scores mean something to them as well. So this process can get very expensive, visiting colleges. If you're hiring some fancy schmancy college counselor, not me, it could be tens, sometimes hundreds of thousands of dollars. But if you're going to spend money, spend it on test prep because those scores matter. And they matter more than ever before. So spend your money where it matters. Number 3, change the narrative. Change how we talk about our kids, how we talk about ourselves. What I mean by that is to not define ourselves by how hard we work. That's a tough one for me as the daughter of an immigrant and as a woman in an industry that is dominated by females in terms of numbers, but at the top is really dominated by male leaders. So I always feel like I have to work hard. But when we define ourselves and our kids as hardworking, we really miss out on what they actually are. Hardworking and studious and diligent and resilient, those are adjectives that we use to describe ourselves and our kids, and we think that's good and positive. Those adjectives can be applied to millions of students in high school, millions of college students. We need to teach our kids to talk about themselves in nouns. I am America's college counselor. I am the author of Soundbite. I am the CEO of Application Nation. When we talk about ourselves using nouns, other people do too. So when you're thinking about letters of recommendation, and if parents have to fill out what's called a brag sheet, a brag form that you fill out for the counselor before they write the letter of recommendation, do not rely on describing your child using those adjectives. When students are communicating to teachers about writing a letter of recommendation for them, they should be using those nouns. Instead of saying that you are a gifted public speaker, you don't want to be described as just a hardworking student. We have a student that is in our group right now who's a senior. She's come up with this incredibly cool test now to identify autism in females. I don't want her to be described in her letters of recommendation as hardworking and studious. I want her to be known for what she has created because she's the only high school student that's done it before. And also when we rely on hardworking and studious and diligent, these adjectives carry racial, gender, and cultural stereotypes with them. So use specific identifiers and nouns when you're talking about yourself and your kids. Communicate that to the letter writers. Make sure your kids are using those specific terms about themselves instead of those generic adjectives, because we define our path by how we describe ourselves. Number 4, this is going to be a tough one. What your major is in college does not dictate your career, nor does it dictate your earning potential. Business, computer science, any of the pre-med majors like biology, chemistry, neuroscience, and others, they're not only extremely competitive major choices to list on an application, but they are also very common majors for South Asian applicants and Jewish applicants alike. When a student narrowly defines a pre-professional path as a high school student, it limits them from seeing what else is out there. And you don't need to be a business major to be highly successful in life. You don't need to be a science major to apply to medical school. I encourage the students in this room to be open to other majors. Parents, I encourage all of you to be open to the areas of interest that your kids are enjoying and excelling, and it might not be business, computer science, or another science field, and that's okay. We are setting our kids up for a successful college experience. They have a lifetime to prepare and do careers. We want them to get an education that's going to grow with them. There's so many students that graduate college, get into the industry that they thought was the right one, and they quickly realize they are not happy doing it. But when you have a liberal arts major, you can do anything. And when students are actually choosing the major that they want, they feel more fulfilled. Fulfillment leads to happiness. Happiness leads to personal, professional, and even financial success. Number 5, activities are like major choices. Certain ones are more expected for certain racial and cultural groups. Don't fall into this trap. Encourage your kids to defy stereotypes and expectations. They should be doing extracurricular activities that no one else around them is doing, no one in their family has ever done. And while they're at it, they should have one activity that aligns with that cool major that they want to pursue in college. When you have evidence for your major choice on your extracurricular activities list, it is a secret weapon in strengthening your application. Students almost always are going to be filling out the common application that is the most widely accepted application for American colleges and even some colleges and universities abroad. There's only room for 10 activities, and for some that might be too many, like my high school freshman son. But 10 activities, that's plenty. And in fact, I'm thinking of someone I worked with several years ago that is going to be is a senior at Stanford. That student had 7 activities on their list. So what I set up on the panel, more is not better. But it's important to try new things. It's okay to do a sport. I played tennis, like what seems like everybody else did. You can join high school clubs. You can do community service. But you should also try something else. You know, a student who likes to write poetry should start writing poetry and never stop. By the time they reach senior year of high school, they will have this beautiful collection of poetry. It doesn't need to get published, but doing it and spending the time doing something that you're passionate about makes such a difference on that activities list and such a difference on your application. That student who has some weird obsession about the geography of Niagara Falls should create a model, a scalable model that takes over their entire dining room table. The student who loves history should walk over to their local historical museum, ours is around the block from where we live, ask if you can volunteer. I guarantee you they will not say no. And then you can dress up in, Revolutionary War gear and do historical reenactments in your community. But these are things that we don't often think about. They're so cool. They're so much cooler than just doing what everybody else is doing. So put yourself out there. Do things that are daring. Be bold. That's a lesson for the high school students. That's a lesson for all of the parents in the room as well. You're never too old to be bold about your choices and to do the things that you really love to do. Number 6, essays. They are the most transformative way to celebrate your culture, your heritage, and your identity. The immigrant story never gets old. The first generation story, the second generation story is never the same. One of the best ways to protect against racial discrimination in the admissions process is to write about your race. Put it out there. So for all the students in this room, there's one thing that you walk away with when you get to that time when you are applying to college and you're applying to 7 or 8 colleges, not 20 or 30. For every application you submit, you have to promise me that one of your essays for each college is about your South Asian identity and heritage. That can be your personal statement. That can be one of your supplemental essays. But every college needs to know your background. Number 7, college lists. This is another important one. Just like major choices don't define future careers, getting a degree from a certain college doesn't define future success. It is so easy to get caught up with those college rankings, and a bunch just got released in the last couple of weeks. It's so easy to feel that Ivy League aura. It's so easy to be attracted to the prestige of certain colleges instead of focusing on the fit for our kids. As parents, our biggest point of pride is going to be always our children. It shouldn't be where our children go to college, though. We need to stop measuring the success of our child's admissions process by how low the acceptance rate was, or how highly ranked the college is, or how many billionaires graduated from that college. It's nothing to do with our kids and how good of a fit that college is. Those are empty data points, just like a missed chapter in a book, just like a missed chapter in our kids' extraordinary lives. College should be educational. It should be challenging, it should be life-changing, it should be balanced, and it should be fun too. Which brings me back to Raj, my high school friend. I finally found him on LinkedIn yesterday. Sarah, thanks for helping me find him. Where he went to college was right back at me. It is not where you would think. You might not have ever heard of this college before. And that's why I love it. Raj attended Drew University in Madison, New Jersey, so not too far from here. He was a government major. He attended Columbia University for a master's in international security policy. For the past 20 years, Raj has worked for the U.S. Department of State as a political and economic expert, serving all over the world, including the Consulate General in Mumbai. It doesn't matter where you go to college. It matters what you do with that education. We can't overlook, we can't ignore that missed chapter, whether it's in a book like The Chosen or our kids' lives. I've spent my entire career addressing inequities, discrimination, and bias in the admissions process. I've written countless op-eds about it. I work with hundreds of South Asian students a year, yet I have never written directly about or spoken about South Asians in college admissions in a public forum until tonight. This event should be a new chapter for all of us. It is so important to have all of you here and to have the support of the Consulate General of India, the culture tree, of me, of your parents, of colleges. It is absolutely critical that we discuss, challenge, and work to change how South Asians are viewed and treated in the admissions process. Your chapter starts now. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. If you can just have a seat, and I'll just call all the panelists back. So if there are any questions, parents or the high schoolers will open it up. If you can just come here. And in 10-15 minutes, we'll go downstairs, and all our panelists will be there for your questions. So if there are any questions, you can just raise your hand and we'll, okay.
How much would it typically cost to have you help my two kids, who right now in Stuyvesant Bronx Science, go from 10th grade to a Ivy League school? And what kind of admission and assistance can you provide us?
What was that last part?
What kind of assistance can you provide us and the cost associated with it?
Well, I love Bronx Science. When I worked at Penn, I used to cover all of New York City, so I'm very familiar with Bronx Science and all the New York City schools. Getting great college advising help shouldn't cost a lot of money. So I came from nothing and didn't have college counseling advice. So I have, number one, a tremendous amount of free resources on my website. I do a blog every single week, no matter how busy I am. I've got free guides. I do reels, about 1 or 2 a week, that help families. If you like what you hear and you feel like you trust me, you can always become a member of our college counseling online community called Application Nation. And through that membership, it is a monthly subscription. It is, if you start as a younger family, it's $69 a month. And for a lot of families, that can be, part of that is their financial budget and they can't go anymore. But in that group, you get regular Zoom calls from me. All the extra resources are all available. And I answer, and our team answers questions every single day of the week, 24/7. We even have a staff member who lives in Australia so that when I'm sleeping for a couple of hours, someone is answering questions. But obviously, if you need more support, you can always do extra things. We call them add-ons in Application Nation. You can do everything if you want. We have some families who can just afford to pay the monthly subscription, and then we have some families who want to meet with me every time I do the private sessions. They want all their essays edited. They want a college list. They want an application review. They want a mock interview. Basically, you can choose whatever suits your budget and whatever your family needs. What was that? Yeah, that's available. What does it cost? Is that what you were asking?
We can
Yeah.
actually take this question one-on-one.
Sure.
Maybe. So let's open it up for a few more questions, 2 or 3. Yes.
I have a senior who is on the Application Nation 25 group, and what she provides just in that group is super helpful. So you don't always need one-on-one. It's helpful. We've done few one-on-ones, but we didn't do it for everything because the guides are extremely useful. But my question is, you said about not pressuring the kids for Ivy schools, and they're all. But what about the peer pressure? What happens, like the pressure that, and this anybody can answer, right? Like, what happens with the peer pressure where if you say, and for my own child, I don't think Ivy Leagues would be a perfect fit for him, but I don't want him to think I don't believe in him by not letting him apply to those places. So how do you balance the peer pressure and what do you think is a good fit for him?
And I think that question could be answered by any of the panelists. But Sarah, why don't you start in answering that?
Yeah, the peer pressure is tougher than sometimes any kind of pressure. I totally respect that question, and I think it's an important one. I do think the students on the panel would be great to answer. I think, you have to, we say this a lot, stay in your own lane. That is the most important thing. But this is a good lesson. I'm sure Casey can agree. This is something that they're going to have to do for the rest of their life. When they get to college and the competition is even greater than their high school, or they're competing for jobs or internships, you've got to block it out. And Sarah works with me, and we've been friends for almost 25 years. We worked at Penn together, especially when we were starting off the business. I would often compare myself to other people in the field. And I would say, they don't have as much admissions experience or this and that. In the end, I've got a job to do, and I need to be the best I can be for every single family, and I got to just focus on myself. But I'm curious with all of you what your experience was like with peer pressure.
I mean, I will say that there's always going to be peer pressure. It's something you can't avoid. I would say have them apply to an Ivy League and actually encourage them to do it, because telling them you have their back in doing them, that will actually empower them to move forward and apply to any college and say, okay, my parents, the people who know me best, say I can do it and I can actually move forward. I can go to this school. Okay, I can get into another school that has, say, a 5% acceptance rate. That's not an Ivy. You having their back means a lot. So tell them to apply and have their back, and yeah.
I'm just going to add, I think a lot of times it's what in the institutions that you're applying to do you find most exciting? I think what's so amazing about our education system is that we've got institutions that are world class, regardless of where you are geographically on the West Coast or the East Coast. You will find the right program. And so for students, I just think back to my high school class, and we just had our 5th year reunion a couple of years ago. And so many of them, they found their college they graduated with, and they found their program that excited them. And so for the student to be able to find what excites them and to be able to share that with their peers, that education of their peer set of, this is why I'm going here and this is why I'm excited, folks don't know. They haven't been to these schools themselves. And I think that education aspect of telling your friends what's exciting you about that school gets them excited for you too.
And then
Let's
I just wanted to add in two things. So one, you can't control their peers, but you can control yourself as a parent. So you can even just clarify, don't do it for me, right? Wherever you land, I'm happy to support your decision. You want to apply to Ivy Leagues? Fine. You want to apply to other schools? Fine. But remove maybe the assumption that the pressure is also coming from you, because that could be from association. Kids are talking about how their other parents are pressuring, and then it's, oh my God, if I don't apply to an Ivy League, am I letting my mom down? So just clarify. No pressure from me. The second thing I would do is, this is a perfect opportunity to teach decision-making skills. Why? Not because I'm questioning you can't, but what about it? Well, it sounds good. Well, do we just make decisions because things sound good? And actually trying to model, let's go through. Decision-making is a key skill for lifelong success. This is a big decision that you're making. It's your decision. Let's build out a decision-making framework. Pros, cons, what does that look like? And with Ivy League specifically, it can be just in the same framework. Maybe things are a little bit different, but I'm pretty sure not that different. But you have reach schools, you have safety schools, and then you have in the middle. Encourage, sure, Ivy Leagues can be some of the reach, but what else too? Because that's not it, right? It's not all eggs in that basket. But again, by encouraging a decision-making process, you're actually teaching them a very useful skill in the context of something that might be, is it peer pressure? Is that part influencing the decision-making? Is that biasing it? When you write it down and put it on paper, it can be like, wait, that should not be a pro. That, oh, my friend from high school who I might not talk to when I go off to college, that I'm making a lifelong decision because of what others may think. But it's a lot easier said than done. For any of the students here, this is a real lived experience, and what I think is important is that peer pressure is real, and you may feel it. And so parents, your role is to not add to that and to clarify, not to add to it, and be supportive in making the decision of, to what Sarah was saying before, it's what's best for you as a student, not what may be best for someone else and someone else. And as a student, when you start to learn what's best for everyone is different, then it's okay, peer pressure to go to your best school? That doesn't mean it's my best school. And my college search journey is to find what's best for me. Just a very quick story. I can talk a lot, but I'll try to reel it in a little bit. I got a list from my guidance counselor, not a college advisor, guidance counselor, reach schools, safe schools, all of this stuff. The only schools on that list that I got into were a little bit under what I felt I deserved, and they were state schools. I went out on a limb and applied to Lafayette College because I had friends there. I visited there. I loved it. I loved the feel. It had nothing to do with all this other stuff. I lucked out. I got a full ride, and I actually was able to take out less loans to go to a highly acclaimed private institution. And so that was a journey to find what was best for me, not all these other things. It wasn't on anyone else's list. It wasn't all of this peer pressure. I was able to isolate that. And so I really think as a parent, clarifying, I want where you're going to be happy, where you're going to be successful. That's how you combat peer pressure, because your kids, as much as maybe they don't show it, and I'm sorry to blow up your spot for all the children here, but they want to make you happy. And if they hear from you that I'm happy, if you're happy and where you want to be, that can help push back against the peer pressure. Because at the end of the day, what you guys want for them means a lot more than what their friends may be pressuring them.
Sorry, any questions from students? But I know if you have one question, and if you want to direct it to any of the panelists, let us know. Okay, two of the students, okay.
Good evening, Anu. It was a beautiful presentation, and to the team you have is outstanding.
Thank you.
I, as an immigrant who moved here to America, I was a physician back home and didn't have to go through the college process. And for me, I am totally lost. How did these kids choose the 15 or 20 or 10? Like Sarah said, there are like thousands of colleges. I am so lost. I'm totally lost in this ocean of colleges because it was different, right? You took an exam, you got your grades, and you got into your medical school, right? That's it. But here, it's not it. So, both of you, amazing what you guys are doing and have done. How did you come up to the top 10 or 20 for you or for anybody? Kind of what would be your guidance as students? Thank you.
So I more recently applied to college, I think. And I actually applied twice because I transferred. But the first time around, I had in my head, because my brother went to a NESCAC, he went to Colby, that I wanted to go to small liberal arts college because I wanted to be like my brother. So I applied to small liberal arts college schools, but I also didn't want to go to the same school as him because he was a senior. So I decided to go and I also wanted to stay local in Massachusetts. So I chose a school called Brandeis. I realized I didn't want to do the small liberal arts college and university and research aspect, and I wanted to be in a city. And I thought a lot about what I wanted, and I only applied again. First time around, 8 schools. Second round, I only applied to 3 schools. I applied to BU, NYU, and Northeastern. Got into all 3. I was really lucky that time. And I picked Northeastern. And really what I had is I always thought about, the second time I was really proud of how I thought through it, is I took a lot of time to reflect about like what did I want and what did I want to go forward. And, I thought about, okay, I wanted to do something that would position me well professionally. All schools are amazing schools, but one school had co-op, and I thought that was really exciting. And then I wanted to go abroad, but I also didn't want to deal with the whole credit craziness of going abroad because I already had to deal with the crazy credit transfer. And 2 of those schools had a lot of global campus sites, which was NYU and Northeastern. So those 2 schools are my top choices. But one of those schools had 2 of those, and so I ended up choosing Northeastern. And it had a campus, which was very big pro.
And then for me, I think a huge part of my education for myself about colleges was my junior year. My parents and we went on a trip to see different kinds of colleges. And so we toured Middlebury College in Vermont, which was great, in a small school, and I loved. I had a bunch of friends who were there and loved that school. We toured some schools in California, including UC Berkeley, so the biggest of them all, and then and Stanford, and then out. We also went down to some cities, and I went and saw Georgetown. And for us, I think for me, it was getting a sense of size and geography. And I think I'm from Boston, so I like the local. I actually didn't tour Harvard until I got in. And so for me, a big part of it was just getting the feel for the school and recognizing that a lot of schools are very similar, and you hear that on these college tours, that you're going to be hearing a lot of similar things. And so I realized for myself that I wanted a liberal arts school. I wanted to be on the East Coast, and I also wanted a school that was large enough where I felt like I could meet someone new every day, but not so large where it felt like a big city. And so I think I landed on Harvard partly because I wanted to be able to academically have a diverse community and then also have those opportunities to leverage my Boston community. But it was very much like trial and error touring these other schools that got me there.
I just want to highlight how important the transfer aspect is, that it's like, it doesn't have to be perfect, the first choice. Like, remove the pressure. Maybe it removes that, like, that can cloud your decision making of like, it must be perfect. Nothing's perfect in life, right? You're trying to maximize best fit. But knowing that you can transfer, and sometimes it might be easier, you know more about yourself, you can navigate it more, and it just reduces the stress, and it doesn't have to be, are these the right 10? Well, maybe, like, the thing is just to remember, as parents, we all went, or not everyone, but we went to college, so we know what we want from college. Our kids don't. So, like, that's a perfect example. Do I want a small school? Well, what if you don't? Do you have any idea what a small school is? Not until you live it. And so I think leaving that breathing room of it doesn't have to be 100% right, And the college journey looks different for different people, and that's okay.
So any high schoolers that have any questions? You have a question? And if you can direct it to one panelist so that we can get more questions.
I come from a very competitive high school, and I think that something that I've dealt with a lot is managing friendships and how to handle competitiveness in school, in clubs, in activities, and everything. How do you guys handle it? How do you manage making good friends? How do you manage pursuing a strong career and life?
Great question.
I mean, there's clubs, when you get in college, there's clubs that you have to try out for, you have to apply for. Friends that make it toxic and start creating drama over it aren't people that you want to be friends with in the first place. I think that's actually the way that you should go around it and think through it. That's how I've thought through it. I haven't had to deal with that. I've been lucky, but that's how I would, quite frankly, think about it.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I think finding the right balance of people that make you feel like supported and happy is obviously what I'm sure you're already doing and trying to do. But when you have those folks around you, I think it's like thinking about what are you doing? And I think we talked about it in the panel earlier, but you know your mission, and sometimes it's easy and it will be constant throughout your career that you will feel those moments of distress where, am I doing something wrong, or what is this person doing? And I think importantly, when you go from high school to college and onwards, you continue to sort of expand the opportunities that you can go and do. And so in high school, many people, their end goal is college. And in college, for many people, it's a job, but already there's so many opportunities. You can go into different professions. And what you realize is the goals that you start to practice setting for yourself in high school are really giving you great habits for how you're going to have to do it on your own in the real world. And you're going to be constantly trying to benchmark yourself against your peers, but now you're doing a whole bunch of things. And so I think what's a great skill to start practicing in high school is, how do I feel confident in what I'm doing and block out what else is happening in a way that's healthy for me?
I just want to quickly say sorry, but college is the first time that you're voice of a culture you want to be in, and it's the first opportunity that you choose people to be around. Somewhat indirectly, but high school wasn't chosen by you necessarily of where to go, who else is there. And so it may feel tough now, but know that that's not just who everyone is always going to be. And so it's one of those important things about choosing college. We hear a lot about this, like right fit, where does it feel good? It's not just about studying. It's about the people you're around and the culture you want to be around. And so just to motivate through it, it can be tough as a high schooler being surrounded by that. Take a growth mindset. You know what you don't want friends to be like moving forward, because that doesn't feel good. And that's okay. But I love that advice. Like, it might just not be a friend. Maybe it's more of an associate, and maybe it's just someone that you associate with. But that's a learning lesson for you also.
I'll just mention one little tip. It'll be very quick. When you are about to start the process, whether it's the beginning of senior year or you start thinking about it much earlier, keep your college list to yourself. It will help you tremendously get through this process. When you start to tell your friends where you're applying, it starts to get a lot more complicated. So that's a tip that I would say to every single student who is going to go to college. Just keep that college list between you and your parents and your counselor. Those are the only people that really need to know what your college list looks like.
And I think we'll take one last question, but you can ask other questions that you might have when we are downstairs.
How obviously to keep the anxiety levels manageable and support your kids. I'm very curious from all of your perspectives, what are the things that we kind of should be doing? I know each family is different, each situation is different, but how can we lend our support in the most optimum way? How do we have this alchemy coming together, but collaborating with our kids, the schools, counselors and all of that? Thanks.
I'll just start off by saying you will build such incredible beautiful highs and lows with your kids when you start visiting colleges with them. It is the coolest experience. You never expect it. And yes, there will be some highs and lows, but you will look back on those visits and they will be beautiful. I still look back on my dad taking me to visit all those NESCAC schools. They're amazing, by the way. But I understand it's not for everybody. My best memories with my dad are visiting every single incredible small liberal arts college in the Northeast. And that's probably a big reason why I do what I do. So I'd start there.
I think touring colleges was actually very fun. So I think doing those college tours, and then when it comes to writing those essays and those supplements, don't get involved at the beginning of the supplement, get involved at the very end. Because yes, you're with us during the supplement, but sort of we just need time to brain dump. You were there with us, and then you can say, well, what about this? Like, you said this during to me, and this really stood out. And I remember working on a supplement, and my dad actually went to a tour with me, and he said, I remember you saying this about this college, and it was, I think, UVM. And I was like, oh, crap. And I remembered it, and I wrote it down. It was actually a really good line that I told him, and I added it to my supplement. So I think, yeah.
Yeah, I'd add, I think being involved and aware so that when the student feels like they want to step in, that is great. And so knowing what's happening without then offering at every moment a place to step in, you are tagging along with the process and then can offer that advice. But I think having my parents be informed and know who my friends were, know who was in the school, who were the guidance counselors, who were the college counselors, that awareness, and then also the awareness to step in at the right time was very helpful.
This is also just for however young kids are, starting to develop emotional intelligence and mental health hygiene. One of the things I always talk about, we don't as a coach, we're not therapeutic at all, but you can talk about mental health without being therapeutic. A quick story, I was taking 4 APs my junior year, not getting enough sleep, super stressed. I had AP bio exam. It was the worst chapter on fungi. It was the hardest chapter ever. And I got sick, and I went to the nurse, and I thought I had food poisoning or something, and I curled up, and I was like, what's going on? And she's like, you're having an anxiety attack. I had no idea what anxiety felt like. I had no idea what stress was. I thought I was sick. And so just developing an understanding of how our body is feeling, how our mental health is feeling. It's an executive function of self-monitoring. We're monitoring ourselves. And so developing that of just an awareness of how we're feeling is the first thing to work on coping strategies. Again, stress isn't bad. Feeling a little down isn't bad. Feeling demotivated isn't bad. The second you know you're feeling it, though, you can do things about it. So you're feeling stressed, go on a walk. You're feeling down, get some sunlight. You can actually then start to address the problem. And again, it's less about the parent. The parent can help teach how to do this, how they can do this themselves. The one other thing that I think is really important for parents. Society has taught a lot of students to think, I have inputs that lead to outputs. And the inputs are how hard do I work and what grades do I get? Some people that I've had the biggest success coaching, they come to me, they're trying really hard, they're getting 3 hours of sleep a night, they're getting A's, but they still need help. You know why? Because they're miserable, they're stressed, they're crying, they're depressed. And what's really important to is incorporate in that success equation how you feel too. So it's not just what work do I put in and what grades does it lead to or what college does it lead to. It's what work do I put in, what is the result, and how do I feel about that result, and how do I feel about everything I put in. And that the whole thing is important. And so really trying to approach these things holistically, and that as a student, the way you feel and your happiness is just as important to me. And that's how we influence our decision making. And I think that's a great way just to support them, again, to begin to navigate this stuff on their own, but you're giving them permission to, and you're helping offer guidance when they want it and when they may need it.
Thank you so much. So a few logistical topics before we go downstairs. We will be sharing, we're recording this whole panel discussion as well as talk, so we'll share it in an email, and we'll also share the contact information for Casey and Sarah. So you can ask more questions that you have. As a parent and as a person, I have three key takeaways after today. One is don't do too much. Do what you enjoy, but take it to the next level. Get organized. I think I'm hearing that loud and clear in any way. And as parents, we can support our kids in getting organized also, because there's just so much going on. And this is my own realization, is that never discount the power of connections. Connect with people, talk to people. You never know how that connection will evolve. So with that, I just want to give you a big hand. Thank you so much to all our panelists. We do want to take a photograph.
Hi, I'm Andrea and I'm on the OHI team. I just wanted to make a few last announcements. So one, once we wrap up, we would love if all the Application Nation students and their families can assemble in the left corner and take a photo all together. It's great that everyone's able to be here. And then also we just wanted to announce that there's still time to register for OHI. So you can just go to ohi.ai, and we normally don't do this, but we're giving everyone a free membership. So you don't even have to give your credit card or anything like that, but just so you can get organized. I think Kavish might have talked about how he used it in his college application process, and that's really why we wanted to have this event. We saw Kavish and we were like, wow, somebody actually used it for this process, so might as well see if anyone else might as well. And so if you register, you are entered into the raffle, and then you'll get a text, and we have the raffle items downstairs. So with that, thank you all so much, and good luck with your high school and college experience and everything like that. Thank you.